Welcome to the Canzano and Wilner podcast, everyone. Special guest this week, Oregon State Athletic Director Scott Barnes. We're thrilled to have him. Lots to talk about. We could turn a Scott Barnes conversation into like a 10-part podcast. There's so much going on.
This is part one today. I think he's going to be a great guest to have because he can talk about the Pac-12. He can talk about the larger issues that are of everybody's interest in college athletics. He's worked at a variety of places. He finds himself kind of at the center of this quest with Oregon State and Washington State in an important season. They're doing some things that, have never really been done before. So without further ado, let's bring him on. I also want to ask him, this is interesting. Scott Barnes, the Oregon State Athletic Director, has a farm of some kind. Now, I grew up a little rural. I want to ask him about his farm. So he's joining us now. There he is in his office. How are you?
Doing great, guys. Good to see you today.
Hey, Scott.
Let's start with the farm. Can you just help us understand what kind of animals, what kind of livestock do you have out there on the Barnes homestead?
Well, I think we should probably rephrase that as a hobby farm. Let's start there. John C., I think you and I have had some conversations about, I raised 70 head of cattle in high school and sort of went there, did that, and I thought I was done. So this is a Milana Barnes and Jody Barnes, my daughter and my wife's sort of development here. We did buy some property, a couple acres outside of Corvallis, moved in December, and they started their mission. And so when they're talking to me about 17 chickens, 3 Nubian goats, and 2 barn cats, and they're saying, here's where we're going. All I'm really doing, guys, is negotiating the terms of my surrender. That's all I'm doing. So we do have exactly that, along with a couple of golden doodles, and they love it. They really do. To be honest, we're about 15 minutes from campus and out there a little bit. It's really nice just to kind of get away and enjoy a little privacy when I get home. So it's been really good that way. And I'm there to help. I'm not there to lead in the farm operation. I'm there to help.
Yeah, Scott, I was wondering, it's been a pressure cooker of 14, 15 months. How often can you detox, and what are you doing to clear your mind? Everybody's got to clear their mind at some point.
Yeah, it is interesting. It used to be where we relished the July and early August because that's when we got time off. And if you think about the last 2 summers, guys, it has been crazy, absolutely crazy. What I like to do is I find some time, like we had the game Saturday night, Monday we had our press conference. Sunday morning I got up and went to one of my fly fishing spots and spent 3 hours on a river, and that's where I unplugged. And it wasn't about an hour and 10 minutes from my house. Got there, was just a delightful morning. Got home about noon and went back at it.
And do you actually not think about work when you're doing that?
I can. That's probably the only place that I can do that is when I'm on a river with my fly rod. It's probably the only place I can do that.
Did you catch anything?
Oh yeah, I had a great day. That's why I'm not going to tell you where I went.
I love it. You got a career as a guide in your future.
I would rather. Yeah, I'm not there, but I do have fun. I do have fun with it.
What was Saturday like? Feel good to get back on the field?
Yeah, I think you and I text a little bit, John W. It was kind of a nice distraction to get back to what we're used to doing and focusing on our student athletes and the fans. And, it was a great day. Had a great donor reception on Friday night in my board of advisors meeting that morning. And I got to touch all the people that care so much and have invested so much in us. And then to go out and take some time, but to get it right, it took us a little time. You're seeing that across the country with a whole new staff in our situation, plus new student athletes. But I love the trajectory that I see in this program, and it's all about growth. And so really looking forward to that next step and enjoy just being back in it. That's why we're all here.
Yeah, it was interesting to see and be in the stadium and see the enthusiasm. You had a good turnout, I thought, with your ticket holders. And then, I looked at the Civil War game on the horizon here in a couple weeks, and standing room only tickets now on sale for that. It feels like your fans are showing up. How important is the attendance and the viewership on the CW in this football season to you?
Yeah, now more than ever, super important. And so you think about how our fans have supported, how Beaver Nation has supported us. And last year we set attendance records in football and gymnastics and wrestling and baseball. So many sports come back to this year with a totally different look in terms of our schedule. And we retain 96% of our season ticket holders in that regard. And so really happy with that. So proud of Beaver Nation. And then the CW minus, look at any new venture, you've got some tweaks to make in production and other things. But to be in every household, as an example, Jayathy Murthy, our president's nephew, text her from New Jersey. I'm watching you right now. Yeah. And so that reach and our ability to execute on the field, combining those two things is really a powerful element to where we're trying to go.
Did you have any reaction when you heard that the Oregon and Washington games were going to be blacked out on Comcast?
We just we did our part in making sure everybody around us knew that not only are our games not blocked out, but we're national. And so we wanted to make sure folks knew that, and we'll just take care of our business. We love, you've seen the stats, but you go from a 20-25% reach to households to 100%. And now it's what do we do with that, right? And that's what we're focusing on.
Very diplomatic answer.
Yeah. Very diplomatic. I want to drill down a little bit on that CW deal, because when you were out looking, you and Washington State were out looking to sell those games, there was just a lot of speculation. Would there be an appetite? And all of a sudden, here comes the CW and Dennis Miller, president there. He says, hey, they've got a real appetite for inventory. They wanted to stack your games with the ACC. How important was that for you guys? And I know you were involved in that deal. Can you take us behind the curtain a little bit as that unfolded?
Yeah, no, it was, we first of all, we had to sort of understand what our goal was, right? And as much as we're all in need of finances, and certainly we got that done, our priority was reach for all the reasons that we know. And there was more than one suitor, and we had an opportunity to work with an excellent consultant who got us in front of several different entities. But we landed with the CW. We love the reach, but we also love the time slots. We love what they're doing. We love their mentality. We're both in growth mode in this thing together, and so that partnership, and then it's spun off. Obviously, we have a local baseball agreement with CW as well, and continue to continue to build around that. So really excited about it. We were concerned about timing. We thought that, and we knew that we were late. Just everything unfolded the way it did. We were late in the game. We were late to get a schedule together. We were late to consummate this, and it all sort of worked out together. We were building a schedule, sort of the analogy of you're building the plane as it's leaving the runway, and that's what we were doing in both getting the schedule together and finding a media partner. And until we had the schedule, we couldn't consummate the deal. But I appreciated the interest from the multiple suitors, and ultimately the commitment by CW.
So how does that, could you walk us through then how that relates to 2025? Obviously the partnership with the Mountain West on the scheduling is not going to be renewed for next season. How is everything fitting together on that front?
Yeah, it's a little bit of the same. As we think about our path forward, we did a 1-year deal with CW, but certainly have interest in looking at that again. And it'll be once we get our schedule set, then we'll be out in the market for the 2025 year and potentially beyond. So It's we're in a bit of the similar position as we were a year ago in that regard.
Are you more comfortable because in a weird way, I mean, it worked out. You have, a year where you go, okay, it was okay to walk on the high wire, so to speak. Are you more comfortable, or do you ever get comfortable not having a plan?
No, we have a plan. It's just the execution of the plan and the optionality, narrowing down the optionality to get to the point where we're executing and we're moving that direction. So to answer your question, I don't know if comfortable is the right word, but certainly we've done it. We know we can do it, and we've been down this road before, and we understand, the buttons to push and how to probably move even more efficiently through this process. So it's good to have last year under our belt. I would hate for this to be Groundhog Day over and over again, but certainly last year was helpful in informing how we move forward this year.
And what's the balance between putting together a schedule that is a great sell for TV and putting together a schedule that will help you guys win?
Yeah, and all eyes on the CFP selection committee and what they continue to look for. But at the end of the day, our goal is the highest and best, and we think we're heading that direction. There are a lot of decisions that a lot of factors, I should say, that go into decisions on moving forward. And now that we know our path and we've made that decision, we can execute those agreements. But to answer your question, there's always that balance between wins and strength of schedule, right? And that's whether it's basketball or football or anything else. And I really like where we're headed as it relates to that balance in terms of enough meat on the bone. And you can see with the contracts that are already signed, Power 5 contracts that are signed, along with what we're executing, to be right in that sweet spot.
I think when I saw the news on Sunday that, you guys did not renew with the Mountain West, and I immediately went to, oh gosh, there's something imminent here. I'm being told to pump the brakes on that. But can you maybe give us a glimpse into, is it fair to say that the schedule in 25 will feature more Power 4 teams than the schedule in 24, or is that a leap you can't take yet?
Until we get, it'll be similar. It'll be similar, but perhaps a bit more as it relates to Power 5. But overall strength of schedule will be, as we look at it, we're going to be in that, as I said, that sweet spot for sure. And it's like last year, or any time we announce a schedule, we wait for all the contracts to be buttoned down and in the hopper before we make those announcements. So we still have some time before we do that.
Scott, you have been on the men's basketball committee twice. Have you been on twice? Two different.
Yeah, I served another tour of duty this last year, right? There was a vacancy, and so yes, I've been on twice. Yes.
So it seems like the committee for March Madness, the committee makes a point of saying the non-conference schedule matters, right? You got to make the attempt to play a challenging schedule, and we're going to factor that into the at-large process. Do you think that the football selection committee needs to be overt in the weight it's giving, send a message in the weight it's giving to strength of schedule?
Yeah, I do. I think, and what's challenging is a lot of the schools that have, say 9 conference games, and who they're playing in the non-conference isn't always super strong, and they rely on just their conference schedule. And it is hard. I mean, when you think about the regions and if you're not playing crossover games, and it's hard to get an assessment. But overall, strength of schedule matters, and non-conference schedule matters. And look, if you look at the model that the CFP uses, the origination of that model came from the men's basketball committee. Yeah. A lot of what they do, the principles, guiding principles, nitty gritty, all of that comes from Hancock's involvement in the men's basketball committee.
I want to pivot a little bit to the game going on a couple weeks from now. You've got a civil war at Reser Stadium. I mentioned earlier standing room only tickets. And I got an email on that, and I went, "Whoa, already? It's here." It's out of rhythm, of course. But how important was that game for you guys to get? And I see in men's basketball, you're going to continue to play that series. Can you maybe speak to that a little bit? That relationship and playing that game where you don't have to get on a plane to go play.
Yeah, and just to be transparent, look, when all this came down last August, there were a lot of fans that didn't want to play that game, right? I mean, just to be honest. And what I tell them is, look, if you walk in the locker room and you ask every single student athlete what they'd want to do, they want to play. They absolutely want to play. Now, you couple that with the loss of rivalries across the country through these cycles of conference realignment, and that's what made fundamentally part of what made and drove college athletics to the success we've had are those rivalries. So, coming out of the gate, we felt it was important to lock football up, and I gave my coaches the latitude this first go around to do what they wanted to do. There's a lot of challenges from them, and I wanted them to do what they wanted to do their first go around. And some chose to continue in every sport, continue the rivalries. Some did not. Now, the next wave here, I would prefer all of them to play unless there's a strategic reason not to. And I say that because of the importance, and we're seeing it. We're seeing West Coast schools travel to the Eastern Seaboard in multiple sports, and we have a chance to play a rival that's 45 minutes down the road. It's nonsense not to do that unless there's a compelling strategic reason not to. And so, moving forward, we're gonna where we can, we're gonna make that happen. It just makes sense. It's part of where I believe college athletics is moving to a more regional structure. I think the Knight Commission had it right in 2020 when they authored the proposal to separate Olympic sports from football. They doubled down on that here last year and shared that again. And I think that's where all this is headed anyway. So let's do that. Let's be mindful of our student athlete experience where we can be and take advantage of it.
Where do you think? Excuse me. Where do you think the basketballs will fall in that restructuring? Do you see them off with football, or do you see them with the Olympic sports?
No, I think I see them with the Olympic sports. Great question. You look at with MTEs and the like. You can build that cross-regional schedule, the national schedule, and still be regional in your league participation. And Gonzaga is a great example of that. You can get everything you need out of it while staying regional in geographic proximity. And I think, or at least I hope, that would be the case. And there's not a reason in my mind to pull basketball out.
You mentioned where it's going. Where do you think it's going? The ecosystem itself, college football, what's this going to look like in 2028, 2034, beyond, in your mind?
College football specifically, or college athletics?
Let's say college athletics, but work football in there.
Yeah. So I think the first thing I tell you is that what has happened in some cases is built on a bit of a false premise, and that's that we all operate like we're all sophisticated business entities, and that this settlement says we're all sophisticated business entities, so we should be able to do revenue share and the like. Well, what sophisticated business entity builds 20 or 30 subsidiary organizations are sports, and they build them to lose money and are supported by one or two, and have this higher ed operate under this higher ed shared governance model that means you got to check in with the faculty senate, you got to check in with the student association and the board of trustees. But now we're here, And so let's move forward and let me answer your question. Now we're here and we truly have to operate like a business. So what that means, and I'm going to unpack a couple of things. One is it means we have to, in some form or fashion, decouple ourselves from the university operations, meaning if we're going to operate like a business, and I've challenged my staff, and we're working on a plan to reimagine everything we do in the business enterprise and revenue generation, and we'll bring some folks in to help reimagine that. But in order to do that, you can't stay in the same structure. So you're going to have to decouple or uncouple yourself from some of the bureaucracy of higher education to structure yourself in a way that you can execute the new innovative things that you may be doing. So as I think about that, I think about what's next for the student athlete as it relates to reclassification. I think that now that we have to, in all aspects of what we do, operate as a business, and frankly, the notion that academic primacy is going to start to separate even more from that. How we operate is critical, which now means if we're operating like a business and we're restructuring ourselves, and we're doing that at Oregon State, then what does it look like nationally and globally? And what it looks like to me is that you're going to have the number one flagship revenue generator prioritized in the best manner possible. I think that could certainly be the top 50, 60 teams separating from Olympics and having a super conference that plays at a certain level. Olympic sports separated in every aspect of that. Reclassification of the student athlete, ultimately, I'm not in favor of, but we have to adapt. If we're going to be effective leaders, we have to adapt to what's coming. And so what might that look like in terms of the reclassification of student athletes as employees? And what does that mean? Is that across the board, or would that be in specific sports? You bring Title IX into play because you're still part of the university system. You're still operating in that regard. Lots to get to, but ultimately, I believe there's separation from Olympic sports. There's reclassification of the student athlete, and football becomes its own entity with a czar to run it.
What's the trigger, you think, for all of it?
I think the trigger occurred. I think this settlement, John W., is a trigger towards reclassification. The dollars in college athletics have triggered the realignment operation. That is not done. That is not done by any stretch of the imagination. So if you want to go back and say, what could we have done differently about this? Because I do believe, when you're producing 500,000 scholarships per year out of this system, 75% of the Olympians that we saw this summer come from our system. CEOs galore running companies that come from our system. Look, we're imperfect, but there's a lot right about what we had. It was unique to the world. Now that's going away. And so how do we reimagine ourselves and somehow keep this academic primacy in place moving forward? But I do believe part of the issue, to answer your question, was we let the talking heads, no offense, get ahead of us in what was actually happening. And there's this narrative that we weren't doing anything for the student athletes, when in fact we were doing a hell of a lot. And we continue to do more and more. And we didn't, as athletic directors, presidents, the NCAA, stand up, create a messaging to really tamp down the nonsense and get out in front of this. And we could have made decisions earlier. Cost of attendance was one that we sat on our hands too long for and should have implemented sooner. And I think that was a trigger that led to the next thing, which led to the next thing. And here we sit.
Let's pivot back to the current situation. There's both Wilner and I have written a lot about this. I'm going to use air quotes here. This war chest that's out there.
Yeah.
And there's confusion about how much of that will be used for operating expenses? How much is being set aside for a potential rebuild if it comes to a conference rebuild? Can you help us understand, you read Warchest or hear Warchest, you probably have a different view than the rest of us.
Than the talking heads.
John, I really appreciate the question, because it's a bit of a misnomer in terms of what the assets that we hold. And I'll give you an example of why Oregon State, why we crafted a plan, a four-legged stool funding model. And it'll lead me to answer your question specifically. But why do we have four legs of a stool on our funding model? Because we don't have a war chest. We have operating dollars in the Pac-12 and some other dollars for litigation and other things. But the four-legged stool includes a legislative strategy, which we executed, a fundraising strategy to move towards current use dollars to help operate. It includes the Pac-12 assets and some distribution of those assets, and it includes institutional support at a higher level. Those four things allow us to operate over the next 3 years while we navigate the morass. So to answer your question specifically as it relates to these assets, which are not a war chest, predominantly they're being used for operations because we don't have any conference distributions. And so to operate both our enterprises, Oregon State and Washington State, as well as the Pac-12, those dollars are being, much of those dollars are being used to operate and keep us strong. You've heard me say, we are a Power Five. Every metric that you look at suggests we are. We'll continue to invest as a Power Five at Oregon State, and those dollars are helping us invest at a level where our student athletes see no difference. They're treated just as they've been treated and will be for the next period of time until we get our hope.
And you said, I believe you said you have a 3-year plan, and there's 2 years for the grace period. So you guys planned out for the first year of whatever is next?
Yeah, we have enough room with our four-legged stool to operate 4-3 at this level, and certainly we'll reassess along the way, whatever that third year looks like. Yes.
What does it look like? Tell us. I'm sure you got all the answers, right?
Well, when I got on with you guys, one of the things I was hoping for was some answers from you guys. Could you give me some answers in the process? It could be any number of things. Let me unpack that though, John W. In this way, you've heard us say optionality and flexibility is really important in this process. No stone will be left unturned. But what we also want to lean into is, look, we may have to create some, and have looked at creating additional stones that we'll turn over. But we're going to be bold and we're going to be aggressive in the process, and be ready. And what's critical as you think about timing and you think about doors that are open or not. And look, I tell my staff all the time, I'm carrying a crowbar around to pry those damn doors open continuously. But whatever's next, short-term, intermediate, we have to stay relevant and we have to continue to invest, because that puts us in position for ultimately where we'll be. And if that's tomorrow, awesome. If it's in 3 years, awesome. But we have to stay relevant and positioned for that when it happens.
Do you have a sense on, where the fork in the road is for you guys on, there could be some chaos out there that you benefit from versus, okay, we really need to put our head down. We've talked about these parallel things that are going on. In your mind, is there a timeline? Is it spring of next year? Is it summer of next year that you really need to start thinking about, okay, if there's no chaos, there's a rebuild, or where is that fork?
Yeah. Right. What did Yogi Berra say? When you see the fork in the road, take it. Is that what?
Right.
We are running parallel paths, several different options. So we're thinking and scenario planning for every option. But as we move forward in that process, which is daily, we begin to narrow. And so as I think about timelines and next steps. There's a immediate next step, which is a 25 schedule. There's the intermediate or long-term solution down the road. I think, John, John C, that spring time frame in my mind is where we need to have some more solidified for sure.
The fact that chaos in one conference can benefit schools in different conference, to me, that just typifies college athletics, right? I mean, it shouldn't be like that necessarily.
It's a eat what you kill environment.
Here we are. There's
right?
Nothing more Darwinian than realignment and all that. Are you rooting for chaos?
Yeah, right now, and look, it comes in many forms, and it doesn't mean that it's bad for everybody or it's good for everybody. But yes, because the most opportunities we'll have is if there's a crack that's open and we're positioned, and we will be. That's one thing. The things we can control. I love how we've executed. We need to keep pounding the pavement. We're going to be aggressive. We're not the little engine that could. Even though there's been a mentality in our history, that's not who we are. Look at the metrics from TV viewership to historical success to current success. There's all those reasons, the quality of student athlete and coaches we have, that we are a Power 5 member, and I say that intentionally. We have 5 Power 5 conferences. We're one of them, not 4. We need to be ready to pounce. Chaos, as I've said, is our friend because of that, because it can give more optionality to what we're thinking about. And disruption, chaos, whatever you want to call it, will take place again. There's no question. It's just how soon.
Scott, and it was the spring of 23 when you were at your alma mater and you had a heart incident, and by the grace of God, you've got a cardiac team that's on the scene, and you got great care and you look great. But I have to think when April came around this year that was on your mind. And can you give us an update on your health and how you kind of process that as you move through it? Yeah,
no, John, it was on my mind the day it happened, the sort of the anniversary of it, and all that's transpired, balancing that health crisis, if you will, with the job and sort of reinventing myself. I'd already been ironically on a regimented diet that got me down in weight, and now fast forward, I'm within 3 pounds of my college playing weight. I'm just had a checkup last week. The ticker is in better shape than it's been in decades, because a lot of reason, I think, is because of my diet, my fitness level. So that's God's hand right there for sure. Feel really good about that. And John W., you were talking about how do you unplug and where do you go and what are you doing? Now, more important for me, finding those opportunities. I've been at this thing a long time, and I don't really, in my own mind, have anything to prove to anybody. I don't need to be on a bunch of national committees or this, and I've turned down a bunch to focus on us, to focus on me. And so I'm finding those little opportunities to say no and to bring a little bit more balance to this craziness. And at the same time, I'm built kind of different. This stuff energizes me, and it's kind of who I am. So problem solving, bringing our team together and figuring out is energizing. And so I feel really good right now. I'm blessed to sort of be in the position I'm in, given the issue that I had. So thanks for asking. No, I'm feeling great about where I sit right now.
Does the Scott Barnes diet include eggs from the Scott Barnes farm?
Not yet, because those little chickens don't hatch eggs for 6 months. So we have to nurture them and coddle them. And oh, by the way, 17. No, we actually had 16 chickens and one baby rooster that we didn't know was a rooster that was a stowaway. And so that little guy, it's like a pubescent teenager whose voice is cracking. He's trying to find his crow, and it's hilarious. The guy needs a Ricola or something because he can't quite get it out yet. But 6 months, we're 6 months away from the. Now we're 3 months away from the egg. So more to come. You come into town, we'll do up a nice fresh egg omelet for you.
All right.
I love it. All right, before we cut you loose, we've asked a lot of guests about advice that they received that they still lean on today. You know, I know you played for some legendary basketball coaches. You've been around a lot of people in your career. When we talk advice, what comes to mind?
Yeah, and I do harken back to Boyd Grant and his style of coaching when I was at Fresno State, and I've used this in my career, and my staff would tell you this: look, your highs can't be too high and your lows can't be too low. And if you stay on task and when crap hits the fan, you can show a calmness in your leadership, and when things are great, enjoy them, relish in the moment, but don't get too full of yourself or over your skis on that either, because there's another day. So just keeping level-headed as we move through a process, highly emotional process for so many, and that's how we play basketball. We locked them down on defense. We did our jobs, but our highs weren't too high and our lows weren't too low. We took some of those high emotional swings out of it, and that brought consistency to what we were doing.
Great way to end it. Scott, thank you so much. Incredibly informative for us, I think for fans of Oregon State and Washington State. And can't thank you enough for taking a few minutes. We know how busy you are.
Thank you, Scott.
Absolutely. Great to be with you always, and we'll see you again soon.
Okay.
Go Beavs.
Take care.
Thanks very much.
Thanks.
See you.
All right. There he goes. Wilner, let's kick this around.
I'm hungry.
Yeah. You're asking about his eggs. I could see roadside stand as you pull off the I-5 into Corvallis, Oregon State eggs. Look, I think he gave us some insight into the thinking that Oregon State has. They're in they've been in a precarious position alongside Washington State. Interesting to hear him repeatedly say it's a Power 5. Did you hear that over and over? You know, I think there's a effort there to kind of stay with the schools that have left the Pac-12 behind, and I don't blame Oregon State, Washington State for viewing it that way. Interesting to hear him talk about the CW deal.
Yep.
And the schedule. What were your takeaways?
Well, I thought one thing about the schedule for sure is it seemed like he was hinting that next year's football schedule will have more power conference opponents.
Yes.
I'm curious to see how that whole thing comes together with that balance. You don't want to overschedule to the point where it's going to be, a lot of losses and you become irrelevant, because clearly he referenced several times about relevance being the most important thing for them. But that was interesting. I really was fascinated by, he talked at length about his vision for college sports, right? And about the fact that athletic departments need to be separated from the schools because of all the complications that come within higher education, and, trying to fund an athletic department while you're dealing with everything that comes with running a university and the economics. I thought that all was really interesting. And the fact that he thinks basketball would be regionalized and football would basically be the only thing that is separated from the restructuring of the major college sports.
It's Chip Kelly. It's the Chip Kelly plan, right? Yeah. I mean, football should be its own thing. UCLA basketball should be playing Arizona basketball. Back to the schedule. You think about it, when they were playing in the Pac-12, they had Washington, they had Oregon, they had USC, they had UCLA on the schedule. So I don't know, what is too hard when you talk about piecing together a schedule, but I know this, the CW is interested in growth. And Dennis Miller, in my one-on-one with him, the president of the CW, talked about, the potential to play a Sunday game and wanting better games and wanting to grow. And I really do think that there's some synergy right now with, CW's relationship with the ACC, CW's relationship with the Pac-12. The ACC members want more money. The CW's got some money and needs inventory. There's just some things that line up here, Wilner. And, is it possible that the scheduling partnership that they had with the Mountain West now becomes more of a ACC heavy scheduling partnership with some Stanford and Cal lead-ins, save them some travel? I think Oregon State is already supposed to play Berkeley or play Cal at home. They go to Berkeley this year. But is it possible we could see Stanford and Cal playing these two schools and maybe some other ACC teams playing these two schools? Better games for the CW. I think that stuff is out there if they want it.
Yep. And the ACC only plays 8 conference games. You got a 17 school league that play in football that plays eight conference games. So there could be some room to maneuver more than, say, with the Big 12 or Big 10, where there are nine conference games. So I think it will be really interesting to see how that whole thing unfolds. The interplay between the Pac-12, the ACC, and the CW. Really, you're really spot on with that.
I'm thinking back to, remember when they were looking to build the schedule for 24. I had a conversation with the guy who is the scheduling guru who works behind the scenes at College Football Gridiron. And he's the guy that all the schools consult with. They all buy his service. He helps them piece together the schedules. And he told me, he said, look, anybody can build a schedule. Like it's not impossible to throw a schedule together. And he gave some great examples of schools that were absolutely in a lurch in the past that, had to rework their whole schedule on the fly. And we saw it happen in 24. Boise State moved their games around. Texas Tech got traded from Oregon to Washington State. That game's taking place this weekend. And, Boise State moves so Oregon State and Oregon can play the Civil War game. There was just a lot of jockeying around, but it becomes much easier when you have a conference on board that can just say, hey, look, in your case, you look at the ACC, we have a number of teams. You guys need 10 or 12 games. We have the teams total. The CW's got an appetite. I'm just like, if I'm a betting man, I'm looking at the CW and the ACC and going, I think you might see some of these crossover matchups as a partnership.
Yep. Well, and along those lines, that they need good ratings. With the CW games, that's for sure.
Yep. And they're going to get it if they have better matchups. People will tune in.
Yep.
Let's pivot a little bit to the weekend. We've got a bunch of games on the weekend, including that Washington State Texas Tech game. Oregon trying to play a bounce back game with Boise State. You've got Oregon State going to San Diego State. You've got Cal and Auburn. Give me an idea of where your head is, like just either regionally or nationally, Wilner, as you look at the college football games this week.
Certainly the Texas-Michigan game's interesting. Show us whether Michigan is, a real playoff contender or taking a big step back, I think. A lot of transition, a lot of turnover there, and Texas is very good. So I could see Texas going in and doing what they did to Alabama last year early in the season. I am very curious about the Ducks.
Yeah.
What was what we saw last week more indicative, or are they really the team everybody thought they were going to be? Boise State's kind of a perfect test, right? A really good Mountain West. It's not Ohio State, but it's certainly not Idaho. So what do you think? Are you expecting the Ducks to have a big bounce back game, or you think that they're maybe they're not as good as we thought?
Well, I think there's a few things. Like maybe Idaho's better than everybody thought. Maybe that's a really good FCS team. Okay. But beyond that, Oregon didn't play well. Oregon looked like it tried to come out vanilla, not show anything, and thought they were just going to line up and pile drive Idaho. And Jason Eck, the Idaho coach, did a really good job of doing some things on the defensive line that gave Oregon's offensive line all kinds of problems. Oregon could not run the ball. I think they averaged like 3.8 yards a carry. That's way down from their season average year ago. They just did not have explosion plays in the offense in particular. Dylan Gabriel statistically looked good, But I got to tell you, Wilner, watching him, he looked tentative, afraid to run the ball. He didn't look like he was in rhythm delivering the ball to some of his receivers. So some of it could just be they've got, 13 transfers. It's a week one. Maybe they underestimated their opponent. We've seen these games before, but for that reason, and for the reason, here's another fact. Boise State's 3-0 against Oregon historically. Like, Oregon's got to win this game and look better doing it. Otherwise, you saw him drop in the AP top 25. I just, if I'm Ohio State, I'm watching week one. Now I'm paying attention to week two going, all right, can Oregon stay on the field with us? And so I think, you're that for that reason, I'm watching that game close. I'm also looking at Colorado going to Nebraska.
Yep.
I just need to see it. Like, there's just so much talk about this game, and Colorado just is a lightning rod. But I need to see Colorado go to Nebraska, play well, win, because my eyes tell me that North Dakota State opener, Colorado didn't, at the line of scrimmage, didn't do some things I expected them to do. I want to see Nebraska in Colorado, so I'm interested in that game. I'm also, I think Washington State looked really good, put 70 on Portland State, but now here comes Texas Tech, and that's a real game for Washington State. So they're at home. I'm paying attention to that one, and then Oregon State at San Diego State. Look, we've talked about it. Oregon State's got to be bowl eligible. They've got to stay relevant. That this is a game that a bowl team wins. It's going to San Diego State and playing well and winning that game. But I wasn't totally impressed with Oregon State's win in week one, even though the scoreboard tells you that they won decisively. I think that first quarter, they were down 9-7 at the end of the first quarter. They missed on a touchdown pass throw. The quarterback just missed a wide open receiver. Would have been an easy 7. And then they finally just said, hey, we're going to run the ball, and they blew Idaho State off the field because they were more physical. But they're going to get in games where the physicality will be neutralized.
Yep.
And they're going to have to throw the ball. And I have questions right now on whether they can effectively pass the ball. And I know San Diego State's going to put 7 or 8 in the box and try to, force Giovanni McCoy to beat him with his arm. So that I'm into that game as well.
Gotcha. The one I'd add to that list is ASU, Mississippi State, right? ASU was the most impressive team I saw last weekend.
I told you they were going to be better.
Yeah. Yep.
For
Based
1 week.
on what we expected, they were phenomenal. Now, maybe Wyoming's not any good this year with the coaching change.
Could be.
But ASU looked to me like they had played 3 or 4 games, whereas most teams, you could tell it was the opener. ASU was they were sharp and physical, very impressive. So now we'll see. Mississippi State is a second, maybe even a third-tier SEC team. If ASU wins this game, all of a sudden, you know what? They're relevant a little bit. At least for September, they're relevant, and it's been a while since that was the case.
Yeah, and look, overreaction week one. It's natural. USC is now a playoff team, and Oregon they look mediocre. And look, we need a larger sample size. I'll go back to the 2000 season. Dennis Erickson was coaching at Oregon State. Opener, a lot of hype. 13,000 new season tickets sold that year. Everybody picking Oregon State, and Oregon State goes and plays Eastern Washington in the opener, and they get out of there with a 21-19 win, and everyone went, oh, wow, we're going 6-5. Oregon State ended up 11-1, played Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl, was probably a team in a 12-team playoff nobody would want to play. Give it some time. We need a bigger sample size. But my eyes in week one, my eyes were as big as saucers. I loved it. It was interesting and compelling, but we'll see. Week 2, I think, is going to be just as fun.
Yep. Well, and you mentioned it, right? Oregon, Boise, that series history has one of those games, right? I mean, Chip Kelly's first game, he did not look ready for prime time. And then after that, it was lights out. Yeah.
I remember Chip Kelly after that game, because remember, that was the LeGarrette Blount through the punch game, and Oregon loses this game at Boise. And then Oregon came back the next week and played Purdue and needed overtime to beat Purdue at home. And I remember at the time I told Chip Kelly, I said, I'm not sure you're a bowl team. And we had a long conversation about that. Now they went on to make a bowl. Not only that, I think they made a Rose Bowl, but it was like at that point of the season, it was one shaky win at home. And but Chip Kelly figured it out. Will Dan Lanning and his staff figure it out? Will Trent Bray figure it out? Can Jake Dickert keep figuring it out? How good is Colorado? Will Lincoln Riley continue to look smart? A lot of questions.
A lot of questions. And we'll get to all of it next week.
Yeah. I appreciate everybody who is watching us on YouTube now with the Canzano and Wilner channel. You can search us on YouTube if you want to subscribe to that. Make sure you're subscribed. And for those of you listening to the audio podcast, thank you. Share it with friends and family. You can read him, Jon Wilner, at wilnerhotline.com. You can read me at johncanzano.com. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Thanks so much.